Hey, I'm Mark, and today I'm going to sculpt a Godzilla card holder, because I made cards for my website. At this point, I'm just focused on blocking out the figure, getting the basic shape. I'm not worried about details at this point, since that comes much later. You also may have noticed that I'm not using an armature. There's a few reasons for that. The first one is that I'm lazy today. And the second reason is that this is pretty small, so it doesn't need that much support, and I'm not going to be using that much clay, so lazy. But I'm going to try to sculpt the legendary Godzilla since the spines are pretty stubby, so I won't have to worry about the spines falling over before I bake it, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to have the spines lighting up around the cards. I'm also going to try to make it look like he's swimming, like how he's spines poke out of the water and roaring, all that. I don't really have a plan. I'm just gonna throw clay on the block of wood and see what happens. Right now I'm using a polymer clay, which means I could fuck with it however I want until I bake it, so I won't have to worry about running out of time or drying out like water clay. I'm also using another stick just to make sure I'm using that to guess how big the cards are gonna be. Make sure it can fit in there. And as you can see, I basically sculpt the spines by getting a little blob of clay and slapping it on there until it looks like a very thin fin. So far I'm not doing anything special, I'm just playing with clay. But all that's left is to basically smooth out all these blobs together so I can start working on the detail in a bit. If you really wanted to get detailed, you could always look at reference photos, but for me, I just like to go off by how I remember it. I also have like a bunch of figures, so whenever I'm confused, I'll just stare at one of those for a second. But I'm going to start working on the fins, and I'm going to do that by basically scratching a bunch with a kind of round-ended tool. This will basically give like that very lava flowy effect. And since the texture of Godzilla is pretty much rugged everywhere, however you poke it, it's going to look fine on it. But I'm going to give the spines a little more definition by adding even smaller blobs of clay to the ends of it to make the big blobs into kind of like a tree-like shape. And from that point on, I could start like pinching it and twisting it to a better shape. Thankfully, this is going to be like the most delicate work of it so far, since it's so thin, and the rest of it will be a lot thicker and I won't have to worry about it flopping over. But for now, I'm just going to use my hands to make sure it doesn't fall over every time I poke it, and try to work my way from the tips of the spines downwards to blend it further back into the body. A good thing about not using an armature means I could move it around a little more easily, so I'm going to move the head a bit more because I want to see if it looks better if I position it looking outwards as opposed to forward. Just play around with it until I like it. And since I'm done basically blocking out the figure, I could start worrying about the detail now. So I'm going to start working on the spines, and I'm going to use that little round tool to kind of stroke in some lines, kind of let it flow in and out of the clay. Like I said before, basically just poke it until it looks good. For the fins, it's going to be mostly like longer lines, and as it comes more towards the body, it'll be shorter and a little more deeper lines. At this stage, I just want to make sure I touch every part of the sculpture so far, get rid of all my fingerprints, and make sure it looks like lumps of skin folding over it and crevices and all that. I'm just trying to pack as much detail as I can into this and make it look like not a piece of clay sitting on a piece of wood. Since most of the spines are still pretty rough, I could keep working on them, and for some of them I'm going to pinch the ends of them to make it look like a little sharper and a little more jagged. Yeah, that's basically it. Just keep poking and stabbing wherever I want. And then if you get too tired or too bored, you can always drink more caffeine and speed everything up to Gear 7. And once I'm finally done with the fins, I can finally work a bit more on the face, which I'll poke until it looks good. Now I'm going to switch to more of a raking tool. This is actually something used for your face to pop pimples, I think, but for this purpose, I'm going to use it to scrape away some clay till it looks good. Right now I'm going to focus more on the lower jaw. It's a little wonky, so I'm going to kind of thin it out a little more, make it a little more mouth-like, exactly how I think it should look like. Don't know how else to describe my process other than just poking clay until I like it. With the clay just scraped off the lower jaw, I'm going to use it as the mouth membranes, which is going to help give the face a little more definition and make it look a little more like Godzilla. And once I'm finally done playing dentist with this guy, I'm going to work on the neck a little more by scratching it with another tool. And with the flat end of that same tool, I can basically just poke little lines into it in the shape of scales and do that all over the whole body, and I'll call it done. Now I can just wrap it up in a burrito like in foil and throw it in the oven and harden it, bake it, do stuff to it. But while it's still hot right out of the oven, I'm going to start painting it. I'm going to start off by just pulling out the paint and dripping all over the back, and with a wet paintbrush I could just slap it right on there. Since it's pretty easy, I'm just going to coat the whole figure in the atomic blue, and after that I could use some dry brushing, which I'll just dip my paintbrush in some black paint, cover everything that shouldn't be blue, and it'll have like a blue underglow effect underneath it. A few other colors, and I'll call it done. Either way, I hope you liked the video enough to give it a like, maybe even subscribe if I could ever pronounce that word, and see you later.